It's almost as if maybe we're the first one to think that history had its practical uses.
No, not the first one. But what happens, particularly over the years, is maybe if you looked at our parents' time, there was a much greater integration of, let's say, the intellectuals and the academe with ordinary life and ordinary news and views. Over the years, these have gotten separated. And precisely because I'm not a particular, I don't have a PhD or an MA or even a degree in any of these things, but I'm very interested and I think it's very relevant, then perhaps to be a bridge between all the very interesting knowledge and information that's out there, but it's not being brought to the table. And again, for all of us, we have experiences with interacting with our colleagues from abroad. It's much more integrated in other societies. There's a greater effort at that sort of integration in our neighboring countries in Southeast Asia. And so it's something we could learn from, I think, and that's what we were trying to do.
Well, you succeeded well enough in print. What made you think that you had to try TV?
Well, no, because, again, we're the TV generation. Well, as much as I love books, my recreation, and as much of the learning that I try to do every day comes from watching documentaries and public affairs shows from other countries, and I simply could not see why it wasn't being done here. We were watching, you would watch ANC, anyone watches ANC, a lot of it is very brisk, informative, even emotional collisions in the different shows. But then no one would be saying, but why are all these people fighting? Why are there such strong views? And why is the issue an issue in the first place? And so that's why, as you were pointing out, I started nagging everyone here.
But you had very definite ideas. Despite the fact that you had no experience at all, you had definite ideas of what that show would be, what it would look like, what it would do, what it would say. Starting with its title. You remember the flags that you got for that?
Well, because some of the other proposals were even worse. Okay, there was Quezon and answer, and there were I don't know, there was just but it had a very sort of a basic start. You're informed by the shows and the things you read. There's this really great column in Slate magazine, which is an online magazine that I love, which is called The Explainer, and it really crystallized what I thought needed to be done. You had Teddy Boy Locsin, for example, who had his own show assignment, which was the title of a British show, and it was precisely the sort of thing that he was trying to do.
Okay.
So, the name really matters.
No, you don't. But you don't have to really apologize for it because it worked brilliantly, and it created this public.
Well, you're saying that you're biased because you're my producer, but yeah, I think so.
Yeah, it created this public persona. I mean, everybody now knows Manolo Quezon as the Explainer. Is that a good thing? Is that necessarily
not when people are drunk in a party, because then you're really asked to explain really weird stuff. But yes, and it's because I was glad about this public reaction because it really showed that we were filling a need. That there were people who may not have thought that there was that need, but once you put it out there, then if you notice, remember over the years, people started suggesting ways to change the format, to make it shorter. At one point, we tried breaking it into two, and each time there was a new incarnation of the show. I thought it got a little better and a little more focused, and was able to do what we set out.
Right, but beyond that, really, it seems like we get reactions from, say, university professors saying that you were being quoted by their students and their term papers, and so there's a downside besides having to perform for drunks at parties.
Well, the downside, of course, is, I felt where we failed was that it didn't have a spillover effect in getting. There should have been more shows with people from academia. There should have been more sort of informal explainer-type gatherings in civil society and everywhere. I thought people saw the potential and people appreciated it. I thought that we still we weren't quite able to close the gap that we were trying to close. And then there was a very weird
You tried to do that. In fact, you were probably the first ones on television to try to engage the online community. That's why we would put all your episodes on the net, the scripts, and you would have a blog devoted to responding to it. You're saying that somehow didn't.
Well, I'll give you a very good example to it. In the beginning, what we were trying to do, like you pointed out, we would put our scripts because we were dealing with a lot of facts. I wasn't afraid to put forward my interpretation of events, but I was trying to put our script and even the resources that we had used for research and that sort of thing, and no one cared. In other words, either people were just not critical enough, or maybe, and I appreciate this if that's the case, that they just trusted us. But I felt that that's one thing where I felt there should have been a bigger discussion, that people could have said, hey, have you used this book? Why not this book? I read this book. And that's the sort of thing I was hoping. Remember at one point we would also focus on books.
Right.
But for some reason, maybe there's a little passivity there in terms of the public. And maybe in the future there'll be other ways to try to do that.
But where it did succeed was in sort of elevating you to this stature where you were looked up to by.
Well, that's purely accidental, I think, because it was a group effort, and that's why it's as much as the ability of the people we invited. We had a real cross section. I think we had some of the most senior guests ever on certain shows. I mean, we had guests in their 90s. To teenagers. And that also points to the kind of weird demographics we had on this show, where we had a very strong senior citizen contingent watching us religiously, and college students. It was the sort of working people in between, although I noticed, I heard from a lot of people that we caused some fights because wives would get really irritated because their husbands were watching the show. So maybe we were able to touch a cross-section.
Okay, we'll talk about more of the explainer. We just have to pause for a break. We'll be right back.